and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish, and publish your book. I'm Mark Stay.
And I'm Mark DeVoe, and we would like to say a very big thank you this week to our patrons of the week. Dun, 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 dun. We'd like to say thank you to M.K. Cook and to Melissa Stone. Thank you so much for becoming patrons, and we are so grateful to you and to everyone who supports this podcast. And if you would like to become a supporter of the Bestseller Experiment, you can simply pop along right now. There's this amazing feature on all podcasts. It's the pause button. It's not like radio, is it, where if you kind of walk out of the room and you miss the vital bit of information, press pause and pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support, and then you get this credit card out and you put your number in it, and then you get this really lovely warm feeling. It kind of like oozes, and you walk around for weeks. I've heard people walk around for weeks, like floating on a cloud, glowing, that they know that they're contributing towards the ongoing creation. Yeah, and hobnobs and world peace. Absolutely. Yeah,
we're bringing world peace.
We are bringing actually
people together. Yeah.
We're working on that behind the scenes. Yeah, we haven't mentioned it yet. That's our challenge for 2042, I think, isn't it, Mother?
Yes.
No, but in all seriousness, folks, if you'd like to support the podcast, we are very, very appreciative of all support. And also, if you'd like to join the Academy, oh my gosh, we are getting such amazing people showing up. And you know what? We just want to remind people, the Academy is not about people who've sold 20,000 million books and are looking to. There are people starting their journey. They're thinking of writing their first book, and people who've sold hundreds of thousands of books, and you all get to kind of come into this brilliant playground together and have this amazing experience, a huge community with Mark and I there at the helm, kind of like pushing you on and inspiring you and cheering you all the way and coaching you. So if you'd like to be a part of that, the new intake is in September. So folks, you've got to be quick. Get over to the website, academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. And sign up now, and we would love to get to know about you and your book project. This is your moment. Don't wait another year. Don't wait another month. This is your moment. If you've been thinking about doing this for a while, go to the website now and do it. Mr. Stay, how are you, sir?
I'm good, man. Listen, I know we're pushed for time today. We're both busy boys. But I want an update on your book. This is my promise to the listeners. I'm going to be prodding you every week about your book. How's it going?
It's going really well, Mark. I've had, actually, since I made the declaration last week, I've had someone reach out and say, hey, I work on nonfiction. I'd like to kind of give you some help and advice. So thank you very much. I'll be taking that person up on that. Weirdly enough, in today's interview, there is a reference on a writing perspective to the bigger thing that I'm going to be writing about my book. I'm not going to reveal what it is, but listen for an Easter egg. I couldn't believe it when it dropped. I'm like, what? This is mad. I've been working this for a few months now. So very excited about that. And there's just too much to tell you about, really. The notebook is almost full. I'm going away this week for a few days, which is always a good time to, I don't know about you, Mark, but when I go away and you clear the clutter of all the stuff you have to do in the house. Honestly, guys, if you're struggling with plot, or you're thinking about what idea to write about or what title to pick, go away, even if it's for half a day, go somewhere away from where your to-do list is, escape the house, right? And so I'm expecting some incredible flow coming through. So I'll be updating you next week on that. So.
Wicked.
Exciting stuff. But we have got just a fascinating interview today. An amazing broadcaster voice as well, I've noticed, and there's probably a link there. So Mark, tell us about today's guest.
It's the brilliant Teresa Driscoll. She's a former BBC TV news presenter whose psychological thrillers have sold more than 2 million copies across the world. Her first thriller, I Am Watching You, hit Kindle Number 1 in the UK, USA and Australia. Has sold more than 1 million copies in English alone. And for decades, Teresa was a journalist working across newspapers, magazines and television. So we discuss how her new book, Tell Me Lies, was inspired by a spooky line in a holiday cottage guest book, why she stopped watching television for a year, and how becoming genre aware changed her career.
So folks, this is an absolute cracker. So settle in, get yourself a cuppa, whatever it is that you're doing, and enjoy this chat with Mark, chatting to the lovely and wonderfully wise Teresa Driscoll.
Teresa Driscoll, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you. We've had some sunshine in Devon, so I'm very happy about that. Delighted to be here.
Oh, absolute pleasure. And I'm very excited because I've got in my hot little hands here, I've got a copy of your latest thriller, Tell Me Lies. Tell us about Tell Me Lies, and then I'd like to talk about the cottage that inspired it.
Okay. So Tell Me Lies is really a dark twist on that huge dilemma, which too many people will have faced or seen their friends face should you ever forgive a cheating partner. And this is a very sinister twist on that, where we see a couple, Hannah and Sam, taking a make or break trip to Owl Cottage in beautiful Cornwall. And seriously strange things start to happen there, so that Hannah, who is troubled, not just from the current dilemma, but she's had a difficult childhood, doesn't know whether she's really in danger, whether she's ever really known her husband, and that makes for a quite, I hope, claustrophobic story.
Well, that's the thing about holidays, isn't it? It was, weirdly enough, my first play was about a family in danger of breaking apart, and they go on a camping holiday. And it always struck me as very strange that when a family is fractured, they decide the best thing to do is to cram themselves into a smaller space as possible and go away from home and all the things that give them comfort. So there's loads of room for drama there, isn't there?
There absolutely is. And I think there's quite a lot of pressure, isn't there, around a holiday? Because everyone needs a break, and you go to it, in this circumstance, they're trying to fix a fracture in the relationship. But even if you're not, you go away tired and you have this idyllic idea before you go. And you always hope it turns out. I've had some great holidays, but also there's quite a lot of stress, isn't there? Yeah. This must be a lovely time. And I used to find in the days when I was super busy working in television, I'd nearly always get ill. It's like you keep going, don't you, while you're busy, and then you go on holiday and you get a virus or something. So I think it's a great place to do a story, because it's quite tricky, expectations versus reality, even without it being psych thrillers,
very, very much so. What fascinates me is you had Owl Cottage is based on a real cottage that you stayed at, and there was something, I believe, written in a guest book that freaked you out a bit. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So I had a lot of bucket and spade holidays with my two boys when I was working in television, and we go down to the Lizard in Cornwall, which I love, stayed in lots of different cottages, and we stayed at the same one twice. And I'm not going to say which one it is, because I have sort of based this thriller there, which feels a bit naughty, really. And I don't want the owners to be upset. So I did change the geography and I changed the layout. There was this fab cottage, we stayed in it twice, and I read the guest book one night, and it said, "Lovely time here, apart from the ghost." Now, I am actually quite easily spooked, which for someone who writes psych thrillers is really ridiculous. But that night I was listening out for every creak in the floorboard, and suddenly this really beautiful place, for one night, until I pulled myself together, felt really, really different. So when I was looking for a setting for this story, that's exactly what I wanted. Somewhere which on the outside was still idyllic. You've got this you never see, you've got the owls tooting in the trees, but it actually spirals to become quite a dark place. So that's why I based it. And in fact, I wanted to go and stay there to celebrate finishing the book, but it's been sold, which is why I wrote in the back of the book, hope there are no ghosts. And I hope no one will recognize the cottage. Yeah.
Setting is very key for any novel. But for you, for this one, that seems to be where it's all clicked into place. Is that the usual thing with your novels? How important is setting to you as a writer?
Setting is really important. I normally start with characters. I love reading character-led fiction. I try to write character-led fiction. I don't have to let my readers decide whether I manage to pull that off. So it's normally character first, setting second as being quite vivid. And sometimes I use a number of different settings. With this one, I knew I wanted a claustrophobic atmosphere for the book, for the premise to work. And so I decided on one place, with obviously a few little trips out as tourists do. And so this cottage was really key to the story working.
And owls. There are lots of owls in this book. Tell us about owls.
Yeah, well, okay, look, I hold my hands up here. This is someone who took 10 years to get published. I love owls, and I think, although owls get creepy in this book, I think they're fabulous, and I'm a big fan. So I've had this owl notebook for years. I use a different notebook for every novel. So I was thrilled when I finally got all these ideas and they came together, and I thought, it's going to be Owl Cottage.
Now, just for listeners on audio, you were holding up a sign there that said, "Don't give up which is being held up by a little adorable owl.
Yes, well described, Mark.
So let's talk about the don't give upness of your career, because I think it's one of the things that really, really defines it. Let's go way back though, because I believe even in primary school you were writing. You were writing in notebooks even then. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was an avid reader as a very small child. And, even primary school, I wanted to have my name on the spine of a book. Dream precocious or what, but I dreamt of being an author. And so I used to take exercise books from the stationery cupboard, start lots of books, classic writer to be, never finished them, but always started them well, And then went right through school and met the careers advisor in the sixth form and said, look, I'd love to write fiction. And they said, look, you've got great writing talent, thank you very much, but you probably need a good deal more life experience to write fiction. How about journalism? And this wasn't on my radar at all. I didn't know any journalists. I didn't know about training. And they kindly put me in touch with a number of people who'd done newspaper training with the NCTJ, who trained journalists at the time. And so I thought, this is brilliant, writing and a paycheck. We'll do that then. So I went into newspaper journalism, absolutely loved it. Ended up sort of almost accidentally moving into television reporting and then television news presenting. Loved it all. But it meant there wasn't really any time for fiction. It was a very busy time, especially juggling a TV career with bringing up two gorgeous boys. So it wasn't until I got to my 40s that I found space again and thought, right, now's the time. I'm going to have a go at this fiction. And promptly took 10 years and 4 unpublished books, Mark, to get going.
Is that all? Well, as I understand it, your first novel took you a year. And the thing, we talk about finding time to write, and the thing that you sacrificed in order to write was watching TV for a year. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. And considering I worked in television, it was a bit weird, wasn't it? But, so I would do my job on presenting the BBC News, and then I'd come home, and instead of watching TV to relax, I would write, which I loved. And I wrote that the first book that got published at that. I'd have written other books that hadn't been published, but the one that got published, that's eventually how it happened. And it was just the discipline, wasn't it? Of putting, the bum on the seat and getting the job done, which of course I learnt from all my years in journalism, and keeping going, because having, written books that didn't get published, it was learning to dig deep and keep going. It's the resilience, I think, that, when I'm talking to other writers, I think you need most to work at. It's very much a marathon, not a sprint. And even once I got published, my first 2 books were family dramas, and I hold my hands up now, they didn't sell very well initially. And so even when I had that great break into the industry, I had to learn to dig deep again, change genre, find a new publisher, and then magically I got my breakout book.
Well, there's lots to unpack there, Teresa. Let's go back a bit there, because let's talk about the rejections first of all, because there were I believe you wrote 4 unpublished novels.
Yeah.
And what, as I understand it, the rejections were probably the worst kind of rejections, which were the near misses, which are the ones that said, "Oh, we love your writing. You'll definitely be a novelist one day, just not with us." Those are the worst, aren't they?
They are. And I think that when I talk to writers in particular, I try to give my best advice is being genre aware. And when I go back and try to analyze why I took so long, I call it the scenic route, but why it took so long. In my cases, my writing was falling between 2 genres. It was falling between dark family drama and psychological suspense. And so editors were all very kindly saying, "We love your voice, Teresa, but you're not quite dark enough for psych suspense, and you're too dark for my list of family dramas." And I think the reason I made that mistake, Mark, is because as a journalist, I didn't unpack stories as in by genre, by category. I used to analyze how strong a story is this? Is this going to go on the front page, or is it going to be an inside page lead, or is it going to be a minor story? And I'd be doing everything from human interest features to seriously nasty crime stories. But sometimes you go to court and the stories wouldn't be strong. So when I started writing fiction, I made the mistake of not analyzing and delivering to genre expectations. It wasn't until I sat down and really analyzed all the rejection, thought you've got to separate, all the stories of bad things happening to good people. But is this really going to be a crime story or psych suspense, in which case deliver on the genre expectations, or a family drama where you're going to be pushing away, any investigation, etc. And so that's how I got published. 2 family dramas first. And one of them sold at auction in Germany. I did quite well there. Not so great sales in the UK initially. And that's my top tip: be genre aware. Cross genre can work. Some indies are doing great things in cross genre, but you're making it hard for yourself from the beginning if you're not sufficiently genre aware.
Absolutely. Let's talk about those first 2 books. There's Recipes for Melissa, which came out in 2015, and Last Kiss Goodnight, which was 2016. And as you described them, they're family dramas. I mean, we're just very often that debut, we're just happy to be published, aren't we? I mean, what was that experience like? And the kind of the bittersweetness of having the auction, having all that excitement, and then the sales just not delivering to anticipation.
I was thrilled, of course, to be published, and super grateful to the publishers and the editors, for believing in me. I was lucky. I got a superstar agent who I'm still with, has always believed in my voice. So it was terrific. But what I hadn't been prepared for, having had such a great response initially from agents to my first manuscript, Recipes for Melissa, was, as I say, we got this auction in Germany. All the big 5 in the UK turned it down. And it went to a digital first publisher, hugely enthusiastic editor, had been with the big 5 previously, who had a big dream for it and really thought it was going to get good numbers. And it got beautifully reviewed, but it didn't get big numbers initially. And I didn't know really how to deal with that, because I was thrilled to be published. But the reality is I'm a freelance. You need to make money. And it was very disappointing initially. So the second book was in a 2-book contract, and that similarly, fabulous reviews, but unfortunately similarly, a little bit better, but not great numbers. And I wrote a 3rd book for that publisher, and they turned it down.
Yeesh.
And that really shook me. I wasn't prepared for that, because we tend to go into this not knowing the industry. And of course, it's difficult for authors being honest and talking about hiccups and the roller coaster, because if you're in a trough, you don't want to talk about it. And so when I was in that dip, I was still, trying to be buzzy. I didn't want to lose my chance of promoting myself. It was hard to be honest, but it was devastating to have poor numbers. And then, of course, you have the fear of bad track, that maybe you're not going to get yourself out of the hole. So this was 2016, and I was out of contract. Publisher said they wanted to publish me again, but not that book, thank you. And so I sat at this very desk, and out of contract, and I would say out of desperation, wrote my first psych thriller, which is called I Am Watching You. And I bounced it past my lovely agent, who just sent me back an email saying, "Wow, Teresa, exclamation marks. Yes, let's run with this darker voice, my other voice." But I got a deal for that with a new publisher, again digital, with Thomas & Mercer. Low expectations this time. I just was so pleased to have an advance. Thank you. That's some money I don't have to pay back. However, this does. 2-book deal. Just delighted to be back in the game, because I know how hard it can be to stay published now. Low expectations. And then unbelievably, the book took off.
Fantastic. Now, we're recording this in May 2023, and there's a conversation in the industry at the moment. There was an article on The Bookseller quite recently, and every author Facebook group that I'm in was talking about this, where authors new to the industry really don't know what to expect, because they see the headlines with the 6-figure deals and the major bestsellers that get adapted into movies and all of that good stuff. But for the rest of us, I mean, it is the mid list, the sales that tick along, it's not quite the dazzling career that some of us might imagine. You had worked in the media. What were your expectations of publishing, and what were the big surprises when you were published?
Because it was my big dream, there's no question I was thrilled to be published. That in itself was a life goal. So I was delighted to be published. But because I have been a freelance pretty much my entire career, right through my years in television, I was a freelance working on short-term contracts. So when I came into publishing, I had an expectation what I hoped to make some money as part of my freelance income. Mm-hmm. And so it was a bit of a shock to me that it was quite difficult, as you say, it's rare, those big deals, isn't it? And I was lucky. I did get a reasonable advance from my German auction for my first family drama, and that kept me ticking over for a while. But once that was used up, I suddenly realized it was going to be more difficult. And I got an advance, not a big advance for my thrillers. I'm sure contractually I'm not allowed to say how much, but it was like I was, as a freelance, grateful for it. But I think you realize as you get to know authors, and you don't meet many authors until you're published. I know lots of lovely author friends now, but you just don't, do you? So you don't get these, water cooler conversations where the reality of the industry is shared with you. And so I look forward to being published, but I did expect to make a bit more money early on. And it was a shock talking to other authors how difficult it is to make a living. So all the more that I pinch myself, Mark, that things came good for me with this breakout book at the time when my expectations had actually, slumped.
Well, this is the fairy tale moment of the story, isn't it? Let's talk about I Am Watching You. Wasn't just a hit; it was a smash hit, wasn't it? Tell us how that came about.
Well, basically, Thomas and Mercer, an imprint owned by Amazon Publishing. And so they loved the book, as I say, had great faith in the book. And they offered me a Kindle First promotion. That it's called Amazon First, I think now, isn't it? And it basically is a promotion where for a month your book goes out early, and people who are Prime customers can have access to the book for free, and others can buy it for 99p. Yeah. And the idea is to garner a lot of reviews over a month, see how the book's going to go, and then you get your proper launch. And I remember having a discussion with my agent. This is me being really honest. I said, well, I don't want to give the book away, do I? And they said, well, they will pay you. It's not giving it away. They are Prime customers. And I said, well, surely if I do that, I want to buy it, And I can be honest about that. But, they said this is a great visibility opportunity, and we think it's a great book, and we think it'll really launch it well. And I agonized. And I remember finally saying to my agent, because things didn't go well with the first genre, if I don't do this and it doesn't go well, I'll never forgive myself. Yeah. I'll always be wondering, what might have happened. So I said yes. So the book goes into Amazon Prime, and, 24 hours after it, going out, my husband's shouting up the stairs, it's number one, Teresa. It's number one. I was going, what category? We've got a number one category, whoopee doopy. And he's going, no, it's number one in the whole Kindle in the UK. And a few hours later, America, then Australia, and then Canada.
Wow.
And this was back when this just didn't happen.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that would be marvelous. I'll have my 24 hours of fame, And it just stayed there. And the thing we all dream of, which is, reader recommendation, then kicked in alongside this, promotional machine, and it kept going. And I think, well, I know we've sold over 1.3 million now, and I say that not to boast, wow, because look, this is a book I wrote in the same year I had one rejected.
Yeah.
So how extraordinary.
That is amazing. How much did you know about Thomas and Mercer going in? Because we've had the wonderful Mark Edwards on the podcast a couple of times, and he's a Thomas and Mercer author. And he was talking very honestly about the fact that, for a long time, high street bookshops wouldn't stock the books because they knew it was an Amazon imprint. I think a lot of us are kind of, slightly iffy maybe about digital first publishers, particularly Amazon digital first publishers. But, they've changed your life, haven't they?
Yeah, and here's the thing. Look, I know it can be controversial for some people, and I don't like to get sucked into that. I was turned down by every one of the big five publishers. Right. I love bookshops. I dreamt of being in bookshops. I buy from bookshops, but I feel no guilt that when this lovely publisher came along and said, despite my bag track, we love this book, we'll give it a go. I wasn't going to say, oh no, perhaps I shouldn't. They've been terrific to work with. I did know of Mark Edwards. I knew his books. I knew he was with them. I loved my editor. Immediately we clicked, and my agent had said, I think you're a good fit. So I was just hugely relieved for them to have faith and to give me a chance. And so, as I say, it wasn't like I was in a position to be, worrying about which publisher I was going with. I was super grateful. And they have done wonders ever since. They're a great publisher to work with, collaborative, they let me, get involved in what covers I have, the titles and so on. So I've had a really good experience with them, really good.
Wonderful stuff. Now, you mentioned a dark voice earlier. So talked about using your dark voice, and you started out writing these family dramas. Was that dark voice always there? Were you ever surprised by it? Did it come easily? Where did it come from?
I think it's always been there. And the issue when I was writing family dramas, there was always a real dark theme,
right,
bubbling under the surface, not necessarily a crime per se, but very on the fringe of moral, judgments. There would always be something dark there, which is why it was quite difficult for my writing to fit in family dramas. But I love highly emotional emotional resonance in stories. I love character-led fiction. So I kind of thought I probably sit better in a dark family drama. And the reality is I covered a lot of court cases. I feel very strongly about all the ripples in the pools from court cases, the witnesses, the bystanders, the relatives of victims. And so I realized that the emotional resonance I wanted to get across was actually better and would work better in psych thrillers. And sure, that's turned out to be the case.
We've had a lot of guests on the podcast, journalists and lawyers, who see the dark side of life, and they all end up writing thrillers. None of them end up writing fluffy romances. They all end up writing thrillers.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I think I respect anyone working in any way they choose to work. I don't personally ever take true stories and use them as a bounce for a thriller. And I think that's partly because I've just seen such misery in the real world. It wouldn't feel right to me personally, and that's not judging others. But what I definitely do is take the emotional landscape of some of the stuff I witnessed. I mean, I've interviewed the mother of one of the victims of the Moors murders, Myra Hindley and Ian Brady, and I've never forgotten what an extraordinary, determined, dignified, amazing woman she was. This was the late Anne West. She's no longer with us, and her daughter Leslie Ann Downey was one of those victims. I also interviewed, I remember, Diana Lamplugh, the mother of Susie Lamplugh, who set up the Susie Lamplugh Trust. She was a state agent who went missing. So kind of the mothers who've lost someone, I covered a lot of those stories, and, very, very difficult territory. And I'm often thinking of them when I write fiction. It feels like a safe space, Mark, to examine that emotional landscape, and to shine a light on some of the themes that troubled me, and try and respect the strength of spirit, of human spirit, in overcoming adversity. And I always try, if possible, to walk them back out into the sunshine if I can. Get some kind of justice in fiction, if not in the real world.
Yeah, that's very true. And did writing these thrillers with the darker voice, did it change your method at all? Were you writing in a different way, in a different style?
I would say that I wish I had a different method to write, to be honest. I'm still a pantser. I do plot a bit now, but my process is not particularly practical. And I think it's being a journalist for so many years. I've made my peace with it now, and I realize there's no black or white. There's only the way you write, isn't there?
Yes, very much
so. But when I was a journalist, there were two processes: news gathering, and then writing it up. And Write It Up, Teresa, was deliriously happy, trying to use my best writing skill. The story had been gifted to me from the real world. I now find that my brain is still stuck in that mode with fiction. So Write It Up, Teresa is very happy. But where it comes from, I call her Maker Up Teresa, my imagination and creative self. It's like an app that only works in the background, except when you open it, and then it freezes. So if I confront it and say, where's the next story, Teresa? Nothing happens. So I get an idea, I'll get a character, I'll get a setting, and then I just have to go for a lot of long walks and wait. And if I wait, my imagination, my creative self, Make It Up Teresa, as I call her, fires scenes at me. And it's like watching a film.
Yeah.
And it's just joyful and it feels magical. And I always think, thank goodness, that's how this story came. And then I write it up. So I'm not somebody who can do chapter plans and plots and things, because the story comes in that magical way. I'm very Stephen King, write with the door closed, edit with the door open. I can analyze once it's there, but I have to work this way. So not very practical process.
I think it sounds great. I can relate to that very much so. That idea that you've got this app at the back of your brain ticking away, But like I say, when you try and open it and make it actually do something or force it to do something, it completely crashes. You mentioned you have a notebook for every project, which is something that I do as well. And whenever, not very often when I tell other writers that, they say, oh, I love notebooks, but I'm too scared to write in them. I mean, I just get in there and make a mess. What about you? Do you just, what's your...
The notes are, I mean, as I say, I often get ideas and scenes flowing, and when I'm out and about or when I'm doing the laundry or whatever, then, that doesn't work at this. So I'm jotting things down very fast in the notebook. It's all the jottings of the things I need to write up later rather than planning. And so it'll be weird little things to jog my memory of what's fired. But my notebooks are critical. I love them because they might have lots of dash notes here and there, and it doesn't seem to be very organized, but it's the way my creative process fires and works. And that's really exciting to me because I often look at it and think, well, where did that come from? It's extraordinary. And it quite excites me. And I like to be excited when I'm writing. Yeah. My editors have been lovely. I think it must be easier for them to work with planners. And, I remember having lunch with my editor once, and I was halfway through a book, and she said, I'd really like to talk about, where you're at. And I was petrified meeting someone when I'm halfway through a book. And lovely venue, lovely lunch and everything. I was like this, eyes wide. And she was asking me questions. And I had to go down to the loo and pace about to figure out, try and come on the other bit of the brain to come back. And eventually now she said, I realize, I need to speak to you the day before or 3 days before, send you the notes, and then I can go on walks, and then I can come and talk. I just, as you say, app frozen.
Yes. I mean, I'm the same, actually. If you put me on the spot and ask me what's going to happen, I'm like you. I've become much more of a pantser, and I will put my characters in a situation, not really have much of a clue as to how they're going to get out of it. And sometimes in my notebook, I will just go, how are they going to get out of this one? And then when I come down the next morning, that's my challenge. That's where I start. So
that's exactly me too. Yeah. I will present, make it up, Teresa, with the problem, ask the question, and then just relax. It's called the shower principle, isn't it? Where you step back from the thing you're trying to resolve and just wait for it to happen when you're not staring at it.
Absolutely.
So, that's definitely how it works for me.
I think it comes with experience as well, in trusting the process and knowing that there's going to be more where that came from.
That's it. And for me, it's been about making peace with my process, because I used to worry that it wasn't professional enough, especially once you're in an industry and you've got 2 book deals and you need to be sending premises for future books and so on. It's tricky if you work this way. But I have come to the point where I'm confident enough to say, this is how I work. It's always worked so far. We've got 6 thrillers, and I'm very grateful to my readers. They've done well. I still worry about it if I have pressure put on me. So I have to trust in the magic. I can analyze once we get to the editing stage. That's fine, because the book exists, I'm not worrying about whether it will come good.
Absolutely. Now, am I right in thinking, you mentioned him already, Stephen King. Stephen King gave you some advice on editing. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I love Stephen King's On Writing. Right. It's just such a great book, isn't it? And I used to be a perfectionist where I'd rewrite things in the end, all those books that didn't get published. I'd be rewriting, trying to get the perfect opening. And now my top tip is always write in forward gear. And this was something that Stephen King says in there. Write, without sharing with other people so they don't raise an eyebrow at you and throw you off. Write when you're excited and you dream about it. And he actually says, write 2,000 words a day. I didn't always manage that, but I did learn to write in forward gear with enthusiasm, where you're believing in the magic, just with the door shut. And I do think that's critical.
Fantastic. Now, you and I have something in common. And like I said, we're recording this in May. You worked in television and you once interviewed Dame Edna Everage, which I have as well. So, how was that experience? Because Barry Humphries recently passed away at the time of recording. And what are the big lessons you've taken from sort of journalism and speaking to people like that in the media?
I was a big fan when I got to interview Dame Edna. And when Dame Edna was in the room, you'll know it's Dame Edna, isn't it? Yeah. There's no other conversation to be had. Barry's not there. So I felt it was a tremendous privilege because I was a big fan. But when Dame Edna sat down, she started talking about my husband This was live, and my dog, and I thought, she's researched me, and I was then petrified, Mark, because you know how Dame Enda could be.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I got off fairly lightly, but she teased quite a lot, and it was spectacular experience. It was a real highlight, and of course, sadly lost Barry Humphries, as you say. So I think, what a privilege now that I got that one opportunity, and I think all the years in journalism. It taught me to respect the people who, they are. I mean, obviously he was, a wonderful entertainer and actor, but you get these highs and lows. But it's seeing humankind, isn't it, in all shapes and forms, the highs, the lows, as I say, the strength in the face of adversity, the talent, and the people who are themselves. That's what the joy for me throughout my years in journalism. Seeing people, real, true to themselves. Making the most of life, whatever their circumstance. That was an absolute privilege.
Wonderful. You also interviewed Father Christmas, I believe. How was he, and did you get a peek at his list?
He was utterly charming, and he let me borrow his snowmobile. This was in Lapland. Actually, it was quite a story, because I worked on an evening newspaper, and the news editor ran a competition for a child to be taken to Lapland to meet the real Father Christmas.
Wow.
And I was tasked with, running the competition, and he was going to go on the prize. So I did all this, and a lovely little girl won the competition, and we arranged it all. And then the organisers, who were linked with an airline, said, well, as a girls' one, we'd like a female reporter to go on the trip. So the news editor was not very happy that I got to go instead. And it was absolutely fantastic. And, cabin in the wood, reindeer, met them all, borrowed the snowmobile. And I just thought, well, and they're paying me. This is not a bad job.
Brilliant. Fantastic. What's coming next, Teresa? What's coming after Tell Me Lies?
Well, I'm already working on the next psych thriller. I mean, you always think you can take a little break, have a little, and then the voices start whispering in the ear and you go on the walks and the scenes start playing. That's what's been happening. I'm at the stage where I'm not sharing anything about it because, as I say, if anyone raises their eyebrow at me, I'll be thrown off. Yeah. So I'm at the stage where it's my little project, and I'm enjoying writing it.
That's a wonderful stage. Teresa, that's been wonderful speaking to you. Folks, Tell Me Lies is out there now, along with some great thrillers as well. Thanks so much for speaking to you, and I hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. I love it when we get kind of ex-TV presenters on the show because they just have a way of talking. You feel like you're just getting sucked into this. Like, isn't it brilliant? Absolutely love it.
Good radio voice, good TV voice. Excellent. Yeah.
Really, really
always
good.
A pleasure.
Yeah. It's really lovely. Love Teresa, absolutely lovely. And I'd like to start, let's dive into this incredible story when you think about it. I mean, we've heard a few of these over our time, haven't we? But what a great reminder to everyone out there who's thinking it's never going to happen. I'm not good enough. I'm struggling. I've had too many rejections. I'm going to stop writing. 10 years, 4 unpublished books. And then this incredible success. I mean, how many times do we have to remind you, folks? I do wonder, because there's so much evidence of this idea. And the thing that really stood out for me was Teresa said the first part of her career, she realizes looking back, was about learning resilience. And it's training for resilience, isn't it? That's what this stage of everyone's career is. Absolutely.
And I think she was inspired by the Don't Give Up owl. So I do encourage you to check this out on YouTube. She does have this owl that's holding up a little sign saying, don't give up. And I think if you need a little totem like that to keep you going, because this game is so much about resilience and sticking it out, and sometimes it's reinvention as well, which is something that Teresa has done. And again, in the extended version, we're going to talk about that whole genre aware thing and how that changed everything. But yeah, I mean, I've had this year. I had, you know, ups and downs, and I'm just coming out of a down. I'm just coming out, and I've got a project on the horizon that I'm working on with someone else that I can't talk about yet. But we're two authors who've kind of, we are fed up with being weird. We're going to write something that's genre aware, and you know, so
segue.
Yeah, so yeah, it's you have got to really, really want this, and I totally understand people who feel browbeaten by it. Or maybe, you know, her career could have ended with those first two books and people would have been, that's great. Teresa wrote a couple of books, fantastic. But she kept going and she kept going and she kept going.
This is the key thing. This is, for me, this is so important, because resilience isn't something that, firstly, is easy to pronounce very early in the morning. But resilience is definitely something which is a skill. It's a learned behavior. And I want everyone to realize that when you feel browbeaten, when you are at that point where you're just done, that's where you're about to get your resilience. And no one realizes it. It's like, well, some people do, but a lot of people don't realize that they're facing a brick wall, and that brick wall is called resilience. And if you are willing to try and smash through it, or even just climb over it, walk around it, usually is a better idea. But if you're willing to do that, you build your resilience. It's like working out at the gym on the resilience machine. And the more you work out on it, the more you move towards the chances of something like this happening that we saw with Teresa. I mean, 1.3 million sales. Like, I mean, you could tell when she was telling the story, she's still kind of a bit flabbergasted by what happened. I don't think she still quite believes. It's almost like she's still talking about someone else's story. But that's because she kept going. And I want everyone to, I mean, you know, we talk about the owl. I hope this podcast is the owl for some people. I hope you show up each week and we give you a little bit of the inspiration we get from the authors, because this is what we're hoping to build in people. It's this idea you've just got to keep on going. And the minute you stop, that's the minute when all the dreams end. You know, it's when nothing will happen if you stop writing. So great reminder from Teresa. So good.
I do appreciate it can be really, really hard, and it can feel like there's never going to be an end to it. And maybe it's okay to take a break. We've got someone in the academy who's taken a break of something like 8 years and is now coming back into it. And real life can knock you about a bit and knock you back. And if it's making you unhappy or making you ill, then, you know, get help and maybe step back. But it's always there. It's, you know, this is the great thing about publishing and self-publishing now. The opportunity, that door is always open. You know, you've always got the chance to come back to it anytime. Yeah.
Do you know what I'd say? I would say to people, take a break from maybe writing the book if you're really, really struggling with it. But don't take a break from writing. Switch from writing your book to journaling. Yes. And journal about what you're experiencing. Because you know what? Just writing, you're going to keep your writing chops going by journaling. Journaling, something might come through that process that will be a solution for you, or a new idea for a book, or something that will start marinating in you for a few months. But don't stop writing. Take a break from the thing that's causing you the challenge. Or like, I mean, like you say, like this one person who's just joined the academy, 8 years since they had kind of really got stuck into their writing. So that's another idea, is to find a community, or take a course, or, you know, I mean, join the academy, like do something which will shift you from the stuckness, because that's really where we all end up. We all, when we go with the ups and downs you talked about earlier, when we go down and we end up in the valley, we're staring up at this big hill going, oh, have I got the energy to do it? But that's the low point, because you're not going to go any lower than the valley. And at that point, you just have to start looking up and thinking, okay, let's do this. And sometimes people need to hang around there for a little bit. But journal, honestly, if you don't journal, if you've never tried it, if you tried it and you didn't get into it, I've journaled every single day for the last, I can't even remember now how many years. And it's something magical. about processing your thoughts onto paper. Yeah, I mean, it's probably even scientifically proven now that there's some value in doing that. But so, yeah, I think it's good, but we don't want to put people off. You know, sometimes it might be like for you, Mark, you know how you put your book away after you've written the first draft, leave it for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Maybe if someone's really, really, really stuck, put the book away for 6 weeks. Start on something new. Write a short story, actually, is a great thing, or journal. Yeah. There's loads of options.
We had someone in the academy. We had a craft coaching session last night. Someone in the academy who had really struggled with their first draft, really hated their protagonist, went away for a week on holiday, and came back and was like, I love this now. This is great. I love my protagonist. So, you know, change is good as a rest kind of thing. Yeah, you know, it does make a difference. Yeah.
Let's talk as well about, Teresa mentioned about this life goal of publishing a book. I love that. It was such simplicity. I think, and obviously this podcast, you know, we do obviously, you know, focus on best-selling books and that's, but I love the idea that you can just have this goal of wanting to publish a book, because that has to come first. You can't have a successful book until it's actually published. So I always think people should have some kind of stages to their goals. And to call it a life goal, I think was brilliant, because it is a goal which, when you achieve it, you remember it for the rest of your life. It's something that no one can ever take away from you. Can you think back, Mark, to the time when your first book was published, what that feeling was like, when you just, you know, before it even started like going out into the world, and you just knew that it was going to go out there?
Well, it was, funnily enough, it's about 10 years ago, because I've been going back on my blog and looking at my diary from 10 years ago when we were in post-production on Robot Overlords. So that was when I knew it was going to be published one way or the other, which is, which very often when you're writing a novel on spec, you have no idea what's going to happen with it. But I kind of knew that this was going to happen. So it was focuses the mind, I can tell you that. And it's an unreal feeling. And it's funny enough, it's still the only book where I ever got any ARCs, proof copies, advanced reading copies. So I got the advanced reading copies, and that was kind of, I'm a big boy now.
That's the thing. I mean, it does bring a new level of confidence and belief, because we always talk about in the academy that when you achieve something, you can never question whether you're going to be able to do it in the future, and you can kind of let go of it, because we carry all these things with us when we move forward in life, and especially writing. All these questions about, can I finish a book? Will I ever publish a book? Will anyone buy it? And I think part of the process in life, and especially through the writing process, is accomplishing and achieving those milestone moments so that you can just let go of them. Yeah. And you can then start worrying about something bigger.
It's in the past. Yeah, you got all new worries now.
But that's a good thing, because you're making progress. But I think we get so consumed by worrying about, will I ever, just even finishing your first ever chapter 1. No one can ever take that away from you. You've started a book. Because there is a point, isn't there, where people think about writing a book and then they start writing it. And that moment where they cross the threshold and they start writing it, again, they're now a writer. They're now in the process of writing that book, and they can't ever say, I'm going to be thinking about writing a book for the rest of my life. No, you're actually doing it. It's just good to remember that, I think, as there's always going to be something else in front of you, but they get bigger. It doesn't mean they get harder. They just get bigger in terms of the potential and excitement and, real world stuff where it can become reality in many ways. But
as Joanne Harris said in episode 4 of this podcast, she said, if you're a writer, if you're writing, you're a writer. It's as simple as that. If you're putting pen to paper, you're a writer. And that a lot of people don't even get that far, so.
Well, they might get that far, but they don't get that far in their mind. They don't believe it, or they don't allow themselves to own it. And I think that's a big shift that everyone has to make at some point. And only you can decide that. No one's going to give you a certificate, say, congratulations, you're now officially a writer, and you can now actually get on with it. It's just mad. Now, one of the other things very quickly that I wanted to reference was this idea of how Teresa mentioned how she has a journalistic background. She dealt with a lot of incredibly challenging scenarios and interviewed some people who'd been through some harrowing life events. Yeah. I love the fact that she said, in her fiction, she could write justice. She could create justice, even if you couldn't do it in the real world. And it is a wonderful way of, it's like a superpower, isn't it, that a writer has, where you can make the world right, even if it's just the world in your head or the world around you, or your reader's world. You can make it right and you can put things to justice.
Yeah, I think it's one of the reasons why crime fiction is such a popular genre, because it does have that resolution. And it's interesting. I think I've mentioned this before. Michael Connelly, terrific writer, writes fantastic thrillers, crime thrillers, and very often, the end with a great resolution. There's a showdown, someone's arrested, there's justice. He did a book of his journalism when he was did the crime beat in Los Angeles. And almost all of those true crimes didn't have that resolution. His writing was brilliant, but it didn't have that satisfying tie it all up in a bow at the end kind of thing that you get from his novels. And I thought that was really, really telling. And I think when he spoke to us, he kind of, he mentioned that's his way of making. And in a way, whenever we write fiction, it's us making sense of the world around us and giving it some kind of resolution. It's us presenting an idea, challenging the idea, and then finding synthesis in that. And it's really satisfying when it works. And it's one of the reasons it's so hard, because very often when you write a novel, you are kind of trying to figure out the meaning of life. This is why we get tied up in knots about it. You are taking an aspect of our lives and trying to make sense of it. And it can be in a crime novel, it can be a fantastical novel, it can be about someone's love life, it can be about a moment in history, a day in the life of a single character. But whatever you're writing, it's about the world around you and life in general. And good luck with that.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Now, the other thing Teresa said, she stopped watching TV for a year. Now,
yes.
I mean, I know there are many people out there that don't have TVs. They just, and I think the trouble is now that I know somebody said they don't have TV, but they watch Netflix every night on their iPad. I'm like, well, that doesn't really count, does it? But the point is that there are certain people who, maybe their form of entertainment is listening to podcasts, and we love you for that. But I love the fact that, I've always had this thing, Mark, I must admit, I've always had this thing back, especially when I was younger. Time used to really be my spidey sense and this kind of like trigger that I used to get, where if I was doing something for like even half an hour and I felt like it wasn't really worthwhile, or it was just like, I would get antsy. I'd get antsy and I think I'm wasting my life. And I'd get it like at even 30 minutes. Some people get it at like 5 years. I get it at like 30 minutes. I've chilled out a bit now in my dotage. But the thing is that I think there is this trade-off. There's a thing in economics called opportunity cost. And the idea is that, if you're doing one thing, it excludes you doing an infinity of other things. You can only do, especially us blokes, we can only do one thing at a time, right? So
exactly.
But the point is that, I think like watching, to me, it's about balance. I remember being on a writer's retreat, and it was a week-long writing, like intensive writing. And there was one person on our retreat, bless her, who sat the whole week watching Netflix, kung fu movies. And we were like ribbing her saying, awesome. I know, right? And we say, so how's the writing going? And she said, I'm doing research. Fight scenes. I'm like, oh, okay. And this is like day 1, day 2, day 6, more kung fu. And I think, okay, now we're getting to a point where this is definitely procrastination. There's only so much you can take for fight scenes. So I think there is a balance between, taking time off, giving, especially if you're watching, and we talk about like, watching shows. It's important to do that if you're writing. But it's about keeping that balance. But I wonder what it was with Teresa, where she just went like cold turkey, right? I wonder if she was just watching too much of it.
Well, I think it's part of that. Like you say all the time, people come to us and say, oh, I can't make the time to write. And of course, you don't make the time. There's only a finite amount of time in a day. You have to find the time. And I guess she just looked at her day and said, what's the least productive part of the day? Oh, it's those couple of hours when I'm, sat in front of the TV of an evening. And you just need to find it. In craft coaching last night, we had a whole conversation, a bunch of us talking about when we write. And there are people who write in the morning. There are people who write in the evening. There are people who write in the afternoon, and have to work around family and work and just find the opportunities where it works best. But but it's TV, I think, is, it's
the playing next episode in 8 seconds.
Yeah,
that's the problem. It's become like the infinite scroll of Facebook and all of those wonderful websites that we get lost in. And I think the key thing for people to remember, I think this is the test, folks. If you're listening to this now, and if you're guilty as charged, this is your moment. We're gonna remind you of this every week for the next however many years. If you're watching an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours of Netflix, I know some people do. I mean, what's the ridiculous average stats of what people watch a day on TV, kids particularly, and computer games? Won't even go there. But if you are watching, say, an hour of Netflix a day and you're not writing, that's an issue. Watch 45 minutes of Netflix a day and do your 200 words. That's a better mix. Or even better, write, then watch.
Then treat yourself.
Right, then read, treat yourself. And so it's about getting your priorities in the right order. And I'm definitely in coaching mode now. Well, I'm not actually, because I'm kind of like teaching mode, I guess. But you have to hear this. If you're watching 4 hours of Netflix and a day, and you're wondering why you haven't got the time to write, I think that's the problem. Right? So it's about, and so I have to ask this question to people. Like, how seriously do you want to write a book? Like, seriously, guys, how much do you want this? Because if people can't do 15 or 20 minutes a day, there's the problem. And I know writing's hard, but that's why we create the 200-word challenge. It's to give you a reason to show up every single day to start writing. And then, then make it your reward. In fact, you want to get to a place, like Sting once said, music is its own reward. You want to get a place in your life where writing is its own reward. Yeah. I mean, we know so many amazing writers. They love to write. They get antsy if they're not writing their 200 words a day, and that's what you train. Just like you train for resilience, you also train to get to that place where you can't wait to get back to your book. Yeah, there's going to be difficult days, but generally you love it. And you're a good example of that, Mark. I mean, you have good days and you have difficult days, but generally, I see someone who shows up each day excited as to what the writing day might bring. Yeah. And that's where we have to start, right there. And I'm saying this to myself. I'm saying this to myself as well. I'm not Mr. Guru who's saying I've got this sorted. We're all human, and it's hard blooming work life is always pulling at everything to pull us away from the things that we know we need to be doing, the things that we're passionate about. And that's the bit right there that we have to get on top of. But anyway, we could go on, and then we're going to go on, and we're going to go on in the extended, because we have got some amazing extra things to cover. We're going to talk about near miss rejections that Teresa had, and this importance of genre aware. And Mark and I were talking before the podcast, weren't we, Mark? And we think there's a lot of people who are stuck in this genre, between two genres. And it might be the one reason why people are not getting success, and now might be the moment to review that. So join us in the extenders. We're going to go deep with that. We're also going to talk about advances. Teresa mentioned about not having to pay them back. We're going to talk a bit about what that means, because it's a bit of a dark art. We're going to also talk about the fear of bad track and this idea of a breakout book. And Mark's going to give us a deep dive on writing about setting. So, folks, if that hasn't tempted you, you know what? I don't know what will. Get over to the podcast. Go and support this podcast. bestsellerexperiment.com/support. You will get access to the extendeds that we've done. There's some absolute gold dust in there, folks. And thank you to everyone who's already doing it. And we will see you on the other side. So, Mr. Stay, before we dive into the wins, I want to tell you about a podcast win that we had, I should say, not I, but we had this last week. And I had a new coaching client. I coach people in music, and I coach people in writing and in general life as well. But I had somebody who showed up to do a session with me in music, and he said, "Oh, by the way, my mum says hi. She's a massive fan of the podcast. And
Really?
She's from Kentucky in the US. And I'm like, brilliant. So hello to Mrs. Podcast Mum in Kentucky. I hope you're listening today. But I just thought, wow, isn't it bizarre how far and wide like the podcast goes? And these are two completely unrelated things. And so, yeah, thanks for listening, folks. It's absolutely great. So tell us about the wins this week, Mark.
Okay, got a lovely one from Kate Baker, who's been amazing in the academy. Her amazing book, Made of Steel, came out earlier this year, and she posted in the Facebook group. Actually, said, "OMG, patience is a virtue. A year ago, I withdrew 2 short stories from 3 that I'd sent to the submission pile at People's Friend magazine, which is a huge mag in the UK, and one of those places where you can get short stories published." He said, "I was planning to self-publish a collection, which never happened, but I left them one called Losing His Marbles. The contact confirmed on 8th of August 2022 that Marbles was in the system for consideration. Naturally, it was forgotten in the interim months, what we've Made of Steel and everything, but she just received an email, and this was just a few days ago, so 1 year later, essentially, and it's basically saying, yeah, we love this story, Losing Your Marbles. We're going to send you a contract, set up payments, and hopefully we can get more stories from you." It's just fantastic. And Kate says, "My granny used to get People's Friend, and the readership is huge. I'm really rather chuffed." Wow. We're talking about resilience. We're talking about hanging in there. You never know when you've got to have skin in the game, people. You've got to keep at it. So big congratulations to Kate. That's just fantastic. Kate. Just brilliant. And a couple of lovely wins. Sarah Moorhead, who's coming back on the podcast very, very soon. Keep an eye out for that. She says, "I've got a book signing in Forbidden Planet and my teenage lads think I'm cool." Which is the things you have to do to win your kids' admiration. Now that's and it's Forbidden Planet up in Liverpool, which is an ace branch. So that is very cool. I've not done a Forbidden Planet signing. I've done them at Comic-Cons and stuff, but never in the store. So that is a real coup. That's a real feather in
There we go. Any Forbidden Planet franchise stores out there, give Mark a call. tick that one off your list.
Yeah, that wasn't a...
Well, you never know.
You never know, yeah.
Brilliant.
And just huge congratulations as well to Angela Cena, long-time member of the BXP team. Her latest Rowan McFarlane detective mystery, Lie She Didn't Tell, is out and available to order. It's just Angela's just gone from strength to strength. Again, talk about resilience, just brilliant author who's really just, changed all her covers, experimented with the covers and reaping the rewards now. It's just brilliant. If you love thrillers, check it out. Put a link in the show notes. Fantastic.
And I just want to do a shout out to Sasha, who wrote to us through the Patreon page. And she said, we banging on about like, August is Share the Bestseller Experiment podcast month officially now. Yes. In fact, we might continue it in September, October, November, and December. So breaking news, folks. But Sasha said that she said I didn't just recommend it to one person this last week, or to 2 people, but she recommended it to an entire conference.
The RNA conference, wasn't it?
The RNA conference.
Yeah, fantastic.
She says, "I feel very smug about listening to Mr. D's recommendation request on the episode tonight, as I just got back home from the RNA conference where I recommended the podcast to not 1, not 2, not 3, but an entire room of people. It was a session on podcasting, and we were there to talk about our favourites. Absolutely brilliant. So thank you, Sasha Green. We really appreciate it. I love Sasha. Always sends us messages every week about the podcast.
Absolutely brilliant.
Absolutely, we read them all, Sasha. Thank you so much for sending that across. And so, folks, we hope you've been inspired. I bet you there's a few people out there, Mark, who are going, this was the episode I need to hear. And if it was, please send us an email and tell us what it was about the episode that you heard that shifted something for you, got you back on track. This is what we wake up for and why we love to do this podcast. So please do share that. And of course, there are many different ways to find us on social media.
Yes, we are on Facebook, Bestseller Experiment, Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. We're at Bestseller XP, so drop us a line there. If you've enjoyed the episode, please subscribe. Please give us a rating or a review wherever you get your podcasts. That stuff makes us more visible. Thank you, as always, to our editors, Dave and JD. And if you want to drop us a line, there's bestsellerexperiment.com. There's a contact tab there. You can email us there.
Don't forget the 200-word challenge, 200wordchallenge.com. And as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, folks, if this is your moment, I think Macklemore said that once in a song, if this is your moment, sign up to the Bestseller Academy starting in September, folks. academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. Do it! All right, folks, have a great writing week. Enjoy whatever weather you get this week, whether it's lovely sun or whether it's pouring rain. Get out there and dance in it or sunbathe.
Both.
I know, right? Welcome to summer in England. Yeah. Have a great writing week, folks. And it's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And a goodbye from Mark 2.
Goodbye.